Tomekia Reed is out of Jackson State. What now? Oh, yeah. It's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusions. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and new members will get $150 back in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Grambling's big-time series victory over Texas Southern in baseball. Prior to that, I don't really want to hear, we got a bunch of UDFAs, or it's better to be a UDFA than a late draft pick. I don't want to hear any of that when it comes to the NFL draft. And prior to all of it, we kick off our show with arguably the biggest news of the weekend, Tomekia Reed and her departure from Jackson State. That was one of the things that I was happy it didn't happen during the draft, because it would have gotten swallowed up, but it happened Thursday morning. We already had everything recorded and everything, so we didn't really explore that until the beginning of this week. Yesterday, if you didn't check it out, please go check that out. I gave some of the reasons that I believe that she could have left Jackson State and why it was not, or it should not be considered a lateral move due to the ceiling she now has in the NCAA tournament. That's just a little bit of a synopsis of it. But what about the fallout? What about what happens after Tomekia Reed has left? I coined it in a what I thought was a cool way. I said that the queen of SWAC women's basketball has now moved on to the Queen City. So I think that's really good. They no longer have this monopoly on the minds of everybody in the SWAC women's basketball. That's one way that I feel like I could say it, because for years, you knew you had to go through Jackson State. You knew that you had to go through Tomekia Reed and whoever she had on her squad. That's no longer the case because Tomekia Reed isn't there. We'll find out what Jackson State is all about. But I think that Drake had a line that is very applicable here, and he had at the end of them on one. He said, "I feel like the throne is for the taking. Watch me take it." And I think that should be the mindset of everybody in SWAC women's basketball now, because Tomekia Reed is gone. Whether or not there's blood in the water, you should feel like Jackson State is a tad bit vulnerable until they prove that they aren't. So who's going to step up? Sometimes when dynasties are around, other teams' talents begin to get smothered, and we don't really get to see them rise to certain heights because they're just not better than the team at the top of the dynasty. So I want to see, were you just not better than Tomekia Reed and Jackson State? Now that you have your time to shine, will this be the moment that you take advantage of it? I also want to see, does Jackson State rise in the midst of this? Because no one says Jackson State has to fall off. We don't know who their head coach is going to be. And I'll say this. Tomekia Reed is gone, and now I bet you a bunch of teams are looking to take out a decade or a half decade of frustration on Jackson State. Because when Tomekia Reed was around, it was quiet for a lot of people. There weren't a lot of teams that were able to knock off Jackson State. Now that Reed is gone, I can bet you there's teams who are looking to take out a half decade of frustration on Jackson State. I couldn't get you then, but I can get you now. And it's not even about being vengeful or anything. You can take that part out of it. Who's going to take the crown? in my mind, the crown always rested on the head of Jackson State. Even though they didn't win every year, I felt like they were the best team in the SWAC for the last 4 or 5 years, each year. And when the season started, the crown was already on their head. Somebody had to go take it. The crown is for the taking now. Jackson State came into every season as the favorite, deservedly so, and they walked out the favorite on most of those seasons. The crown is no longer in their possession. They are now one of the teams who is chasing after the crown again. So I'm very interested to see how this goes. Then you look at the other side of it. The other side of it is who's going to be the coach for Jackson State. And the Clarion Ledger had a very interesting article in which they wrote 6 options for Jackson State women's basketball new head coach. You had 2 coaches who are already in the SWAC, and those are very interesting options. You have Dawn Thornton and you have Nate Kilbert. Thornton is by far the most interesting option on this list because we remember how big of a deal it was when she left UAPB to go to Alabama A&M. That was this offseason. I can't imagine her making that move again. I can't imagine her being allowed to make that move again. But maybe, depending on how good that Jackson State is over the next couple of years, and I know this is looking way too far in the future, but depending on how good they are over the next couple of years, you could see Dawn Thornton eventually become the Jackson State women's basketball coach. The reason I'm even entertaining this in the future is because just in December, Thornton gave this quote to the Clarion Ledger. Jackson State has always been my dream job. I bleed blue and white. Who would not want to come back to their alma mater and coach? A place where you won a championship at, a place where you are from and your family is from. That can't help but make me think one day she could go. Not right now. I just don't think it's a realistic option. But one day you could see her coach there. And I don't think it should be shocking. I don't think that should be shocking at all. But here goes the funny thing. She actually signed with with Alabama A&M on April 6th. If Tomekia Reed would have got that Tulane job, I wonder if Dawn Thornton would have been your Jackson State head coach. I really do. Because had she gotten that Tulane job, Jackson State would have been vacant at the same time that Alabama A&M was vacant. And if that's the case, well, she just told you what her dream job was. She probably would have inquired. And as long as they wanted her, that probably would have been her job. I can't help but think that Dawn Thornton would be a Jackson State women's basketball coach if timelines were just a tad bit different. But that's not what happened. And now we have her leading a team that is looking to challenge. We have them as a team who is looking to challenge Jackson State. The next person is Kilbert, who's at Alcorn, which means that he'll be able to complete the trifecta, which is Alcorn, where he's at right now. He's a freaking Mississippi Valley State Hall of Famer. And then also this would mean he was now at Jackson State. And I can run through the rest because outside of Thornton and Kilbert, I don't really find as much intrigue. These are just cool options to me. But then the next 2, because they're kind of in pairs. I wonder if the Clarion Ledger did that on purpose. But you have the 2 coaches who are in the SWAC currently. You have 2 coaches who are coming from the community college level, which is Hope Adams from Mississippi Gulf Coast. And then you also have Tangela Banks from Mississippi Delta. Both of those are community colleges. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Reed came from a community college. Hines, I think it might have been. Is Hines Community College? Let me make sure that's a thing real quick. Hines Community College. That is a thing. And I think at some point, Tomekia Reed was there. So that'll be kind of interesting if they follow that same. Yeah, she was named there in 2015. So I'd have to imagine that, that is where she came from. So I wonder if you could hit that well again. I'm going to go get another community college head coach. It worked with Tomekia Reed. I could see me doing it yet again. So, and is that in Mississippi? As I'm doing that's in Mississippi. So it can repeat itself. And then the last 2 pairing and doing that all off the top of the dome. Shout out to me for remembering that. My memory is a little bit spotty. But yeah, then you have 2 D1 assistant coaches. And for them, this would equal a positional upgrade with a institutional, I guess, not want to say downgrade, but you're going from a high major to a mid major because you were an SEC coach. So it's not the same level of D1, how they kind of branch it off between high major, mid major, low major. But so you have Pauline Love from Alabama and you have Miro Page from Mississippi State. Pauline Love is coaching at Alabama, but she also coached at Southern Miss, so she has that Mississippi connection. It's all there. It's all there. Those are the 6 options that I think are really interesting. And Dawn Thornton will not be their next head coach. But if Jackson State does not hire a head coach that is successful, I can never, ever, ever rule out the idea of of Dawn Thornton being the new Jackson State women's head basketball coach. Now, as we push forward, we're going to move to UDFAs. And this is something that I haven't heard so much this year, but every time I hear it in the face of these situations in the NFL draft, it really grinds my gears because it just feels like the consolation prize. And I'll explore it as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. You see how I'm rocking? I'm rocking the NOLA. I didn't change shirts. I'm about to record another episode with Gerald right after this. So whether we get swept or not, you're about to see this shirt 2 days in a row, and I got pride in it. But tell me, did you think that I guess it doesn't matter now. Who's going to play? The Cavs and the Magic. Donovan Mitchell, Paolo. Who's going to win that game? You have Luka and Kyrie versus Kawhi. Can he get back on top of things? And you have Harden and you have Paul George. This is a very, very, very interesting playoffs, and these are some scores in this playoffs. So you tell me if you think they're going to hit the over or the under on their scoring projections. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. If you're new to FanDuel, even if you get my answer wrong, that's okay. You still get $150 back in bonus bets, win or lose. It is guaranteed. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every moment more. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Let's say I want to go to one of those Mavericks games. So let's say I want to go to one of the Stars games, because it's not just the NBA that are in the playoffs right now. You have the Stars in action in the playoffs. You have the Mavericks in action in the playoffs. And you have the home city Texas Rangers in just regular season action. Almost called them the Arlington Rangers, but they almost jumped on me one time when I called them that on the radio show. Anyway, but you have all of these different options that are near where I am. I can go choose Gametime and I can be able to see my seat. All right, this is the view I have of Wyatt Langford. This is the view I have of Adolis Garcia, of Luka Doncic, of Kyrie Irving. Like this is who I have. Go ahead and go to Gametime, download the app, see my ticket, and if I can find a better price in the same section, same row, they'll credit me back 110% on the difference. It's that beautiful. It's that easy. So go ahead, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out the LOST stream. It's 24/7. We call it Lost because you will get lost in absolute excitement checking out Locked On Sports Today. All day, every day, the first of its kind, 24/7 sports stream on YouTube. Now, we've already looked at Tomekia Reed and the fallout of that, but I think I inaccurately said that this could be the biggest storyline of the weekend. No, the biggest storyline of the weekend in HBCU athletics was the NFL draft and the fact that there was absolutely no HBCU players drafted in this year's NFL draft. Okay. One thing that I'm glad I didn't hear too much of this year, but I hate when I hear it, is being an undrafted free agent is better than being a late draft pick. Until we start seeing more HBCU players drafted, that's not true. It's just not a true statement. You're not in the position. Okay, so I always have this thing where I think about everybody doesn't have the same leash. And what I mean when I say that is the amount of free reign to do what you want to do, right? Like some people can get away with different stuff. Everybody's not treated the same. I think Mike Tomlin said that. Everybody's not treated the same, but everybody's treated equal. You must understand that you, as a Jackson State player, who I think as of right now has no draftees and no UDFAs, you do not have the same luxury as an Ole Miss player. You just got to understand that. So Ole Miss players can be like, yeah, it's probably better to be an undrafted free agent because they don't have to worry about the idea of them not having any draftees. HBCUs do have to worry about that. That is a real thing. So with that being a real thing, you cannot sit here and tell me that we're cool with UDFAs. I don't want to hear about, well, the loyalty is about the same and you get the choice to pick where you want to go, so you don't have to be chosen for. I get that. And that's a very practical viewpoint of this, but it's not really a practical issue, in my opinion. Like this is in large part an emotional issue. We're speaking about the branding. We're speaking about the future of HBCU athletics and their recruitment. We're speaking about players who are looking to achieve their goal and get a once in a lifetime experience. Like, you understand that there's not many people who will get the experience of having their name called in something like a draft, even if nothing comes from it. I'll put it like this. If I'm in their shoes and I'm out of the league after this year, because you know what, the loyalty is the same, I would much rather hear my name called 232nd than not hear my name called at all. Because guess what? If I don't make it through training camp, I still have my name called. And chances are I can record that on TV. Maybe they walked up and said my name. Maybe they just flashed it. I don't know. Like, both are very reasonable, but both are big time moments. So taking a strictly practical approach to this, I think, is taking out a large part of the conversation. So I understand what you mean when you tell me that UDFAs are better than being a late round draft pick. But as long as HBCUs have no draft picks, I don't want to hear it. I just don't think that is true anymore, because there's a joy that comes with hearing your name called. There's a joy with getting a call that you're going to be a UDFA, but also if you had a thought that you would be drafted, there's some disappointment in there. I can guarantee you, I've seen first round picks who have slid farther than they thought they would have a little look of disappointment, despite still being a first rounder, because you had a certain set of expectations that were already placed on you. Because you already thought, I'm about to be a top 10 pick. I'm here at 22. So now you over here thinking that you could be a 5th, 6th rounder, and it's late. I get it. Maybe you might not feel like that's such a big deal, but it is for those guys because they think they're going to be called at this time. And then you go from being that to being undrafted. There's a level of disappointment. There's a level of relief that's paired with that joy when you finally get that call that, okay, I am here. I just think there's so many negative emotions that precede the joy that it's kind of devalued. And I hate to be pessimistic about it, but don't tell me it's the same, because it's not, especially when we talking about fighting the cause. And a lot of speaking on HBCU athletics is speaking about fighting a cause, is speaking about trying to get recruitment. That comes with the territory. I've learned that over time. As a person who's been primarily about the athletics, I had to learn that the other stuff is equally as important. I didn't realize those things when you just talking about what happens for 60 minutes. What happens for 48 minutes or 40 minutes in college. Like that, those are things that are different. And I'm sorry if I'm putting unnecessary doom and gloom. I've never been in that situation. I don't know what that's like. I can only imagine that waiting the 2 rounds that you think you could be drafted only to not get drafted is a disappointment, especially when everybody's in the room together. That's just the way that I feel about it. That's the way that I view it. I would love to know if you think it's different. I can't act like it's only practical. I'm talking about guys' futures. I'm talking about guys achieving the goal that they've had set for themselves since they were 5 years old. I'm talking about the guys who were drawing football players in kindergarten when they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's a very emotional thing. And I know that there's some sadness attached to it. So strictly coming in here and looking at something practically, it don't cut it for me. It does not cut it for me. So I'll leave it at that. And as we push forward, I'll look at Texas Southern versus Grambling baseball, because the outcome of this season series was decided on Sunday. And also it had big time ramifications with a really close game 3. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And I'm a competitive person, and I really do enjoy scratching my competitive side because there's nothing like it. There's nothing like coming on and just playing Monopoly Go and trying to beat your friends, because I'm terrible at the real Monopoly. I just don't have good luck. Maybe I don't know how to make the good investments. But when I make some of those same mistakes on Monopoly Go, which is a mobile twist on the hit classic Monopoly, I'm now able to say, you know what? I didn't make that move right, but you did, and I can go take what's in your vault as long as you don't stop me. I love it. It's like a bunch of second chances. I don't have joy from robbing the vaults and whatnot. This isn't Ocean's 15. Like, that's not me. but I do get joy from being able to make good on some of my mistakes. So go ahead and do that as well. Scratch your competitive side. Go play with friends. Just go ahead and join Monopoly Go and join the 150 million people who do it on a daily basis. So that's Monopoly Go at the App Store or Google Play. Download today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day or making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Whoo-wee. There was a battle of Tigers in the SWAC over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 3-game series, Grambling versus Texas Southern. And unfortunately, it went the way of Grambling. 2-1. I hate it. Grambling lost the first matchup, and they rattled off 2 back-to-back victories on Saturday and Sunday. So no love for TSU over the weekend on their trip to Grambling. But this showdown, more than just being a good series and having some quality games, it was important. It was just an important and an impactful series because Grambling, they're now sitting at 15-6. Texas Southern is sitting at 15-5. And I told you that Grambling won this series 2-1. So let's use the current standings as a baseline. Let's just use it as a baseline of what we're looking for or looking at as far as impact. Number 1, Grambling now holds the tiebreaker. Number 2, Grambling just closed the gap. TSU was still up by half a game. So it's still a half game lead in the SWAC West standings. Over there in the East, them Florida boys, they hooping, right? Bethune-Cookman, FAMU specifically, they're on top. They have the best record in the conference of either division. And then I think Bethune-Cookman is tied with TSU. They either tied with TSU or tied with Grambling. But I think they're 15-5. So I think they're tied with TSU. I already got rid of that tab. But this series, first and foremost, it was the second time that these 2 teams have faced off in a 3-game series. Both times, Grambling won 2-1. Now, what that does is that puts them up as a record of 4-2, which naturally gives them the tiebreaker. TSU losing this last game had such an impact. Number 1, had they won, it would have been 3-3. And I don't know where the tiebreakers would have went from there, but you wouldn't have had the clear head-to-head. So now TSU cannot tie with Grambling. And it's easy to decide that. I don't have to look deep. I love those kind of, right? I don't have to look deep for anything. You lost head-to-head, 4-2. That's the season record. But then also, in addition to that, the gap's just closer. You're 1/2 game ahead, not 1.5. You're just half a game. In that last matchup, the last one on Sunday, it really came down to the wire in which Grambling had the bats jumping. You got to understand, the bats were jumping for Grambling, which is nothing new. They're a really good batting team. They have 2 players in the top 5 as far as batting average goes. The next person at 6, so that's 3 in the top 10. And you have another one at 12, so that's 4 in the top 15. They have arguably the best collection of individual hitters in the SWAC. So you see so much high potential for them. And when you see that high potential, it became a high reality over the weekend because in the first game, they scored 12 runs and a loss. Then the next game, they scored 16 runs. And then the game after that, they scored 5 in the first 3 innings. And that's when TSU, whatever they did, they were able to put Grambling on ice for even a small moment. Because they were up 5-0. They put Grambling on ice for a small moment, and they took that moment. They took that moment to come back, and I think they eventually tied it up, but Grambling never allowed them to take the lead. So it became 5-5, then it became 6-5. So right when in the 7th inning, they were able to make it 6-5, take the lead again. Then you come back in the 8th of your TSU, say, you know what? I'm still rocking. Boom. I knock another one in. And it was really Texas Southern's first pitcher that gave up a lot, or whoever that was in the 2nd and 3rd inning. Was it White? Anyway, that was the struggle for them, was being able to stop them in the beginning. And Grambling built up such a lead that once TSU did come back and they were on ice, those bats weren't going to stay chilled for long. Because we've seen them repeatedly do this. They are one of the best hitting or one of the best scoring teams in the SWAC. So in the 7th and the 9th inning, they both came up with big time shots or big time hits to go ahead and close this game out. So major win for Grambling. They're no longer close to PV. because had they lost, they would have been like 1 game ahead of PV. So now they're 2 games ahead of PV. It's a long season left. We don't know what's going to happen. At the end of the day, PV could come back. Like, that's how long of a season we have left. But this series, was so impactful that I wanted to break down and highlight what was happening in this 3-game series. So for the second time in a row, which is a little different. The first time Grambling won the first 2. This time they win the last 2. But regardless, when Grambling and Texas Southern have faced off, the Grambling Tigers have come up victorious 2-1 in those season series. Now, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We're wrapping up our draft coverage. I don't believe that we'll talk about this again after tomorrow, but Gerald Huggins comes on to talk about the UDFAs and the best fit for them, because I do think it's important. I care about the UDFA fits, and I want to see who fits the best. We have Sundiata Anderson, Mikey Victor, and Aneem Dankwa that will break down on tomorrow's episode. So in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.